Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Visit Tuscaloosa.
It's such a fine line. It may not feel like it when you're in this moment right now and what happened today, but I can tell you it's a fine line between being here and being at the top. But we got to do the work.
And hello again, everybody, and welcome into the latest edition of Tider Insider TV alongside Rodney Orr, who was at home last week. Now, you're not contagious, are you?
No, I'm clear.
All right, good. He's back with us in studio. He's fine. He's good to go. And I'm Gary Harris, of course, and we're going to get to all the portal coming and goings in just a moment. But first, we're going to start with what happened last Thursday in the quarterfinal round of the college football playoffs. Alabama had beaten Oklahoma in the first round in Norman, and the Crimson Tide took a trip to Pasadena hoping for a repeat performance. The fans were certainly hopeful, and it started out well. Indiana's first possession was a 3-and-out with a couple of sacks, but it did not end well. Unlike the game in Norman, Alabama fell behind 17-0, and there was no coming back against Indiana the way there was against OU. 38-3, Rodney. And we're going to talk more about the fourth down call in a minute, but there were still a couple of pivotal plays. It was 3-0 early in the second quarter when they went for it on fourth down. We'll talk about that. And then it was still just 10-0, and Ty Simpson broke out on a run. Would I think been 1st and 10 at the end of Indiana 42. He fumbled the football. If Alabama scores there, it could be 10-3 or 10-7. Instead, Indiana scores with about 20 seconds to go in the half. It was 17-0, and that ultimately, you're going to see the fumble right here. That ultimately, it was ball game.
Yeah, it was. I mean, look, we talked about mistakes. We talked about when Alabama has a lot of success, they're mistake-free. We talked about it last week. And, you know, Gary, you mentioned the fourth down call, but also the fumble, turnovers. And frankly, you know, Kirk Herbstreit made a comment about it looked like very early in the third quarter Alabama was just existing. And I agree with him. I mean, I was really disappointed in the effort after halftime. I mean, it looked like Alabama quit.
Well, the statistics would bear that out. Total yardage, 407 to 193. Crimson Tide got double up in first downs, 22-11. And Indiana rushed for 215 yards. Rodney, here's the trend that continued in this game. Alabama had 17 carries for 23 yards. Now, I don't care what kind of offense you're trying to run. I don't care if you're trying to run, get it out of your hand, quarterback's hands quick, let the receivers run, you're trying to throw it downfield. It's going to be hard to win against these type of teams or in the SEC when you rush 17 times for 23 yards. This was the worst rushing season in Alabama football history, yards per game, since they started recording stats in 1946. That's got to get better.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I was just thinking, I was writing this down. In the Georgia and the SEC championship game, Alabama had -3 yards. Yep. Then in the Oklahoma game, the first playoff game, Alabama won the game, but they still only had, 28 yards rushing. And this one you said, what was it?
17 carries, 23 yards.
Okay, so, you have under 50 yards in 3 games. And that's not Alabama football.
Amazing, they won one of them.
Yeah, it is.
And Ty Simpson, we talk a lot about Ty. First half of the season, he was maybe the leading Heisman candidate. Second half of the season, he didn't play as well. And in this game, now listen, he got a busted rib. He had to leave the game. Understandable. He'd been playing through some things anyway. But, you know, he struggled down the stretch. And before he went out in this game, and it might have been on this play that he took the hit. That busted the ribs. You see the hit, coming right there. I don't know for sure that was the play. But he struggled some in the second half of the season. And it really, I think, impacted this team offensively.
Look, and it did. And the entire offense, eventually, there was no rhythm in the passing game. Since the Oklahoma game when they played here in Tuscaloosa, when they went for 406 against Oklahoma, they seemed to find some things against Auburn, especially in the run game. They ran for 158 in that game, which was probably
great by Alabama standards.
It really was. Again, I think it was just the entire offensive line. Whether it was receivers, whatever. There were injuries. We know that Cuevas, was certainly limited there towards the end, and I think that hurt some. So really, overall, I don't think you can point to one thing offensively.
All right, Simpson's future certainly up in the air. We'll have more on that later on. Right now, let's hear from a couple of the Tide's best players following the Rose Bowl loss in Pasadena and what they think went wrong.
Evidently, I wasn't good enough to do my job better. So defense, we didn't we didn't make the stops that we needed to and stuff like that. So they capitalized on our mistakes. But Indiana had a great plan for us, and they executed well.
It just comes down to us being able to execute, and we didn't execute to our best abilities. And like Tim said, I mean, they just capitalized off all the mistakes we made, and it made it a rough game for us.
All right, execution, and we said we'd get to the fourth down call. And the reason I'm making such a big deal about this is, at the time, it's early second quarter. It's a 3-0 game. These two teams were still filling each other out. You've got the ball 4th and 1 at your own 34-yard line. Now, if you punt the ball, Indiana's going to get the ball back, but they're going to have, to go the length of the field practically. In this situation, I said it before they were in it. I'm not a fan of going for it there. If you make it, you get a yard or two, you still got 64 or 5 yards to go for a touchdown. And unless you bust a big play, and that's very unlikely with Alabama's running game. First of all, I didn't like the decision to go for it. I hated the call. You got Daniel Hill in the Wildcat. He hands off or flips it to Bernard on the jet sweep. Defenses have seen this. They blew it up. Now, all of a sudden, you give them a short field, and they get a touchdown out of it. That's like a turnover to me. I just didn't understand the risk-reward at that point in the game. 3-0, 10-0, 10-3 at half. It's a different game than 17-0, and this helped kind of get the snowball rolling.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it did. I mean, it's 3-zip, as you mentioned, and then you give them the ball to your, 34-yard line. So you set Indiana up. They didn't need any help. They weren't going to need any help. So, like you said, this was essentially a turnover. It's a fourth down. You don't convert. You give them the ball at your 34-yard line. It's a turnover.
Yeah, and it was a lopsided game statistically, like we said. But you know what? If you don't let it get to 17-0 at half, who knows? Maybe it's a different game. Well, now it's time for Coach Talk, and we're going to stay with this theme. Crimson Tide head coach Kalen DeBoer was asked about his decision to go for it on 4th and 1 early in the second quarter. He listed a few factors. He's got confidence in his offense. He said that many times. He said he's got confidence that his defense could hold Indiana to a field goal. That didn't happen. He says the main driving force behind his fourth down decision was he felt it was important to take advantage of possessions and not give the football back.
I really felt like even during that point, I was committed to going for it and wanting, to try to, make it happen. And again, that's where you got to be careful as a head coach when you make those decisions because it can go the other way. But, I think, just looking at the game, I mean, we had to take advantage of every possession for it to end up the way we wanted to. And so, that was one of them.
And I get it. Again, you are trying to hold on to the football there. Rodney, at the same time, I mean, a 3-0 game early in the second quarter, I just think the risk was too great. Now, if they make it and then they drive on down and kick a field goal or get a touchdown, I get it. I'm going to feel differently about it. But I didn't like the decision. All right, let's talk about Kalen DeBoer in his second season with Alabama. Some say this was kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde team. They start out with an embarrassing loss on the road at Florida State. They put together a great stretch, to in the middle of the season with wins over Georgia and Tennessee and Vanderbilt and Missouri. Had a great win at the end of the year in their Iron Bowl, and then lost to Georgia in the SEC Championship, but came back and won at Oklahoma to get a little payback there and then get blown out by Indiana. It was an up-and-down season, and I think the things that are disappointing is that in some of these losses, Rodney, fans feel like Alabama wasn't competitive.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Georgia, Indiana, maybe even Florida State to some degree.
Well, Alabama's not used to losing. They're not used to losing, first of all, but not losing by 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. I mean, those are blowouts. Certainly the 5 touchdowns by anyone's standard, but, again, I think it's the pattern there, Gary, that you're talking about. We saw some of it last year. You write off that first year because it's tough. The transition was tough. Listen, so you expect those kind of results in year 1. Year 2, you don't. And, we heard a lot of talk in the offseason about how this was going to be a different team. And then they show up for the Florida State game. You saw what happened. But give them credit. Kalen DeBoer held the team together. They rallied. They won 8 in a row. Like you said, when they came home on November the 15th to play Oklahoma, they had a chance to basically wrap up that playoff berth. Mm-hmm. Now, they hurt themselves a lot with turnovers in that game. That happens sometimes. But the blowout to Georgia in the SEC championship game, when it really looked like, at least offensively and on special teams, this team was totally unprepared. And then to follow that up a couple of weeks later, when you're healthy, you feel like you're in the best position you've been in a while, and you just lay an egg against Indiana. I mean, it's hard to explain. So I think it's the pattern of the way these losses are happening that have everyone kind of questioning things.
Yeah, it was so bad in the Rose Bowl, Herb Street said on the telecast in the second half that he thought that Alabama had damaged the brand. Wow. I thought that was a little bit too much, but at the same time, it was a tough loss. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, we'll take a look at which Alabama players will be returning next year and the ones that are moving on. There's going to be a big roster turnover, like there is everywhere. And Alabama men's basketball captured a big win in its opener in the SEC against the Kentucky Wildcats. You know, I always say Alabama football, Kentucky Wildcats basketball, they're the same thing. And Kentucky fans were happy, but Alabama looking good, getting ready for a big win at Vanderbilt. We'll have that. And a little bit later on, we'll get to your phone calls, emails, and social media tweets. As always, that phone number, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. You can email us at the address on your screen. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. The award-winning Tider Insider TV will return right after this timeout. Really no surprise here. Caden Proctor is leaving school for the NFL. Proctor announced his decision on social media, thanking his teammates, coaches, and fans. He started 38 out of 40 games at left tackle during his Crimson Tide career, earning consensus All-American honors this season. ESPN's Mel Kiper Jr. lists Proctor as the third best offensive tackle prospect for the upcoming 2026 draft. Proctor is the fourth Alabama player announced that he is leaving early for the NFL, joining wide receiver Jeremy Bernard, center Parker Brailsford, and defensive back Deshaun Jones. Welcome back into TITV, presented by Visit Tuscaloosa. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. All right, comings and goings in the portal. Let's start with, and there's a bunch of them that are leaving. That's the way it always works. Then you bring more guys in. But let's start with a big hit for Alabama coming in. Last night, Hollywood Smothers out of North Carolina State announced that he's going to come to Alabama. Now, this is the big play back. I'm not going to say he's Jahmyr Gibbs because I don't think he's quite at that level.
Right.
But he is explosive.
He is.
And he can make people miss, and he can outrun people to the end zone.
And he's got great vision, great cutback ability, all of those things. Like you said, he may not have that sheer explosiveness. Very few people do. Very few running backs do, but he's good. I mean, he ran for over 900 yards this past season, 6 touchdowns. Again, he's got great vision, great power. He's a good-looking addition to me.
Yeah, first team All-ACC, and again, for a team that struggled to run the football, this is a big pickup for Alabama. And again, they got E.J. Corwell coming in from the high school ranks, who is the best running back in the state, maybe in the country. Still got A.K. Deere from last year, Daniel Hill. So hopefully the running game is headed in the right direction. All right, let's talk about other incoming players. Of course, previously announced that Josh Ford, the tight end from Oklahoma State, that was during the season after Mike Gundy was fired. He's coming in. But Caleb Woodson, just in the last couple of hours, Caleb Woodson, outstanding, productive, 6'3", 230-pound linebacker, inside linebacker from Virginia Tech, announced Bama. And then just a few minutes ago, Caden Strayhorn, 6'3", 310-pound center from Michigan. His dad played for Nick Saban at Michigan State, so his connection there to Alabama with Saban, even though DeBoer is the coach. Those are players that have announced this afternoon. 2 really good players at positions of need.
Yeah, I like Woodson. I think, again, he was a former safety earlier in his career, coming out of high school, kind of grew into that position at inside backer. He's 6'3", he's 230, he's been very productive. He's had like 130 tackles the last couple of seasons, so I really like him, Gary. And Strayhorn, you mentioned his dad played at Michigan State. He's actually on the Michigan State radio broadcast team.
Did not know that.
But he goes to Michigan, now he transfers to Alabama. He played some at IMG Academy. He's got a lot of familiarity with Michael Carroll there. So, 6'2", 6'3", 300 plus. Again, I think he's a guy, Gary, could play center, could play guard.
All right, those are the players that have announced they're coming to Alabama. As far as subtractions, guys going into the portal, I'll run down the whole list for you real quickly. Defensive lineman James Smith, defensive lineman Keon Keeley, linebacker Quay Russaw, linebacker Noah Carter, offensive tackle and guard Wilkin Formby, another offensive lineman Joseph Ionata, offensive lineman Rock Montgomery, wide receivers Jalen Hell, Bubba Hampton, Cole Adams, and Jalen Mbakwe, running back Richard Young, and defensive backs Cam Howard and Cam Calhoun. We're going to talk specifically. Let's start with James Smith. Very productive, a productive interior defensive line with physicality, with athleticism. I thought he made some really big plays down the stretch for Alabama this season. I don't know how you can say this isn't a big loss for that defensive front.
James is a flash player. I mean, we saw what he did against Michigan last year. We saw the potential. We saw it flash many times throughout this season. Probably not the most consistent guy. He didn't play up to his potential, play in and play out, Gary. But again, when you have a guy like him that's experienced with his ability, I don't think you want to lose him. I know people talk about he wasn't very productive. He only had 28 tackles. Well, they're bringing in Devin Tompkins, who's a really good player from USC, and he's had 31 tackles this past season. So it's kind of production-wise, it's very similar. I think James Smith, you always want to keep a guy like that, but that's just me.
And Keon Keeley, a guy who's got a ton of ability. He's in the portal. Long, leverage-type player on the defensive line. Edge rusher, can also play inside.
Yeah, and I thought he made a lot of progress. I mean, obviously he switched from outside linebacker, so he's kind of recruited for. He got bigger. Now, here's the thing. Sounds like he's going to visit Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Remember, he was
almost
committed
went
to
there out of
Notre
high
Dame
school.
for a long time before he flipped to Alabama coming out of high school. So if he ends up there, it's going back to where he basically originally started as a prospect.
And Smith's high school teammate, Quay Russo, I should say, also going to the portal. But I want to ask you about Wilkin Formby. Northridge High School, comes from an Alabama family, played a lot at guard and tackle. I was a little bit surprised when he went into the portal.
Well, I was, and I think, look, Wilkins caught a lot of grief. I mean, I know that early in his career, again, he was an inexperienced player when he came in here. He didn't have a ton of development. I think that was the key for Wilkin when he first got here, and he played some tackle, did a nice job. They moved him inside. I thought the versatility that he showed was really big. And again, for people who've been critical of him, you put him in there at guard, a position that he really wasn't accustomed to. He had to help out Michael Carroll quite a bit. I thought Wilkin did a really, really good job. But guess what? Schools like Texas A&M, LSU, they wouldn't be as interested as they are if he didn't have the ability.
All right, we're getting up against the clock a little bit. Let me go ahead and mention Alabama men's basketball got off to the SEC schedule off to a great start on Saturday against Kentucky. Early tip, 11 a.m. I thought that was a bad scheduling deal by the SEC when you consider winter break 2 days after the Rose Bowl. But Alabama didn't matter. They blew out Kentucky 89-74. Aiden Holloway led the way, 26 points. Aiden Terrell only played 9 minutes. Hopefully he'll be okay. Taylor Bowen missed the game as well. But the good thing about Alabama, they got a lot of depth. Holloway, as I said, tied his career high with 26. Alabama at number 11 Vanderbilt tomorrow night up in Nashville at Memorial Gym. And they are an underdog for that one. Still to come on TITV, we're going to get to your phone calls, your emails, and your tweets on the Decades Pub and Grub hotline. Again, that phone number, 205-348-9882. We want to hear from you, Tider Insider Nation, next. Welcome back to TITV. He's Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris, and I bet you know who you are. It's time for phone calls on the Decades Pub and Grub hotline. Great homemade food from scratch at Decades Pub and Grub downtown at Timerson Square. All right, let's get to Sammy up in Walker County. He's going to lead us off. Hey, Sammy.
Hello, Gary. Rodney, guys, the foundation of success and of your football team is like y'all talking, the offensive line. Do you, Rodney and Gary, think that Kalen DeBoer will have the intestinal fortitude to get another offensive line coach or something? The writing's on the wall. We haven't improved all year.
You know what, Sammy? I think that's something that Kalen DeBoer has to evaluate. I mean, he has to look at the situation. He has to look at his personnel. He has to look at the coaching and make that evaluation on his own. There's been a lot of talk about Coach Cap possibly not returning. I don't know anything in terms of if that's something that Kalen DeBoer is seriously considering right now, because a lot of people are asking about that. But it is certainly something that I know he will evaluate.
All right, thanks for that phone call, Sammy, up in Walker County. Let's get to our email question of the day. As always, it's brought to you by KDM Service Corporation. When it comes to heating and air conditioning, serving your family like our family. I'm afraid Keelan Russell might transfer. He's too good to sit on the bench. Your thoughts? That's from Jim, our pal out in Sparks, Nevada. I don't think he's going to transfer. I think that, again, I think he and Austin Mack, I hope, will both be back. They've got two good freshmen coming in as well. But I don't see any reason that Keelan Russell would transfer at this point.
Not me. Not right now. I don't think you can let Keelan Russell get away. I think, obviously, Gary, we've talked about him. 5-star talent, got a ton of potential. I thought Austin Mack did some nice things in the bowl game, and I like Jet Tamala. I know they got the kid coming in from Utah, Kawa, so they can recruit quarterbacks, that's for sure.
All right, we are going to come back with more phone calls, and Tider Insider TV will roll on. Again, that phone number, 205-348-9882. We'll be right back. Final week of the regular season for Bama and NFL. Derrick Henry, man. He went over 1,500 yards for the fifth time, tying Barry Sanders for the most all time. He's also 32 years old in doing this. Unfortunately, a heartbreaking loss to the Steelers, 26-24. Henry and the Ravens will not be in the playoffs, and John Harbaugh announced today that he and the Ravens will parting ways. Dallas Turner got 2 sacks this week. Boy, he's really come on as an edge rusher for the Vikings as they beat the Packers 16-3. And the Eagles rested most of their starters, but they did allow Devontae Smith to get in to reach 1,000 yards in receiving as they lost to the Commanders 24-17. All right, welcome back into TITV. We're going to squeeze in one more phone call. Rick in Brent is with us. Hey, Rick.
Hey, how are y'all tonight?
Doing great.
Great. Is it true that DeBoer is 0-7 when he trails at halftime?
I think he is winless, yes, Rick. I think that is true. I don't know if it's 0-7 or 0-8, but yes.
key there, Rick. Don't trail at halftime.
That's right.
Take halftime leads. All right, we're going to get one more email in real quickly, I'm told. We got time for one more email from Bernard in Birmingham. Somebody tell Ace Austin to start shooting the ball. It's going to help out down the road. She's, of course, the outstanding freshman for Alabama basketball. I think she's doing just fine, Bernard. They know what a talent they've got there. She's integrating herself into the lineup. She can do a lot of different things, but yes, she can really shoot the three. I think you'll see more of that. Remember, they're 15-1 on the season, so they're after a great start, 1-1 in the SEC. All right, we're going to come back and wrap up this edition of TITV right after this. And welcome back into TITV. Again, thanks to Decades Pub and Grub for the hotline tonight. Had some calls and some emails. Rodney, we got a little bit of time here. The portal, again, I think everybody kind of freaks out initially when you see all these players the day after your final game rush into it. But I had Rudy Arman on my radio show this morning from 977 ESPN Radio in Huntsville, and he's right. You kind of have to let it play out and see where it lines up.
You do, and it always does. And look, there's some guys that you would like to keep. But I think for the most part, I don't really see Alabama's had huge losses right now, Gary, and I think they're doing really, really well. They're set up to do well.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Tighter Insider TV presented by Visit Tuscaloosa. Don't forget, if you missed any of tonight's show, you can catch the replay tonight at 10:30. Or download it anytime and watch it online at WVUA23.com. Rodney will also have it available at TighterInsider.com. We're going to leave you with photos of Alabama gymnastics at last month's Crimson and White preview meet. That's right, gymnastics is back this week, in fact. Alabama's on the road. The Crimson Tide begins the season on Friday night at Clemson. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week on Tighter Insider Television.